through the storm.
Yokoso. Naoko-san to watashi wa kyo minasan wo koko ni wakaru koto ga dekite kawaii ni omote imasu. Minasan ni o dekite ureshi desu. Welcome. Naoko and I are pleased that you have come today, especially those who have come such a long way. We really appreciate you being here, and it's so good to see you. We'd like to start with a few thank yous to the people who have helped us today. So, when I call your name, if you could come forward to the table, we've got a little gift for you. So first of all, Father Pierre. We're so honored that you are celebrating your marriage today, and we have a little gift for you there. We actually waited for Father Pierre to come back from his vacation so that he could join us today. Bill and Fanny, and Mildred, Barry, Josie, Helen, please come forward, Andrew DeCraker, Matthew Norbury, our DJ, and Saki for the work that you're about to do.
Bill's ready to open.
A lot of work has gone into separating this room today. So that was Mildred and Josie, Andrew and Matthew and Barry. And Bill and Fanny have been with us right from the beginning when we started planning this wedding. Almost a year ago actually, so they've been a great help to us, giving us lots of advice. Andrew has done lots of other work as well. He's been setting up this laptop for me, transporting the sound equipment, doing an excellent job with all that, so thank you, Andrew. And Helen on the video camera, thank you, Helen. And Saki later on is going to be our hostess for our concert. And Matthew's doing our DJing. I was so fortunate to have so many good friends here in Vancouver. It's a real blessing for a couple to have friends in common. And also friends with similar interests, friends who know both of us. In particular for Naoko and I, who have both left our families behind in our native countries. It's so good to have friends here who are supporting us and receiving us into your hearts. Now this means that most of us have never actually met our families. Naoko and I are both blessed to have come from stable, loving Christian families. So it is with great pleasure that today we can introduce many of our family members to you. First of all, my parents. We really are blessed to have you here with us. Thank you for honouring us with your presence, for coming all the way from England. And it's so good to have you here. So thank you very much. Now you've met my brother David as the best man. I gave him a gift a couple of days ago, so thank you, David. I'm really honoured. I did the same for him when he got married 24 years ago, was that?
Oh, gosh, no, I've got to come out right.
24 years, yeah. 24 years ago. And we're only 2 years apart in age. There you go. Okay, and then we also have the rest of our family. Okay, so I'd like to introduce my sister to you, Sue. Would you stand up so everyone knows who you are? There she is. Already stand up. This is my sister, Sue. And this is her husband, Jules, and Claudia and Alex, the two children. Hachi Kudasai. This is Kochiro wa Naoko-san no One-san desu. This is Naoko's sister. And she's here with her husband and her 3 children. So thank you for coming. And we also have the Davis family here as well. So there's Marie, Matthew, Rachel and Rebecca. So they're here too. Sadly, our parents can't be with us today either, although they have provided a lot of support and they send their love to you all. So we really thank Patrick and Tomoko for doing a great job standing in for them. Tomoko is originally from Japan, and Patrick lived there for many years. So, very good talk is on that. Now, among my siblings, we each have a different approach to marriage. My younger brother, Andrew, was married just a week ago in a quiet ceremony in England with only 2 witnesses. And this means that I am actually the last of the 5 of us to marry, but only about a week. My sister Sue and her husband had a Zambian-style wedding celebration with traditional African drums and dancing. And one of my siblings was married at the tender age of just 21. So I'm kind of at the opposite extreme. Which leads me to my next topic. You may be thinking, aren't they a little bit old to be getting married? No! This was actually one of the first questions I asked of our spiritual director, Father Pierre, when I started going out with Naoko. And it is true that most people marry in their 20s and then grow old together, dealing with each other's maturing, and they spend their middle years together. But we're actually already in our middle year as well. I am at least. Naoko is eternally young, I believe. So marriage is 2 stages. In the first stage, it's just the 2 of you. The second stage begins when the first child comes along, and then it ends when the youngest child flies the nest. And then we get back to the 3rd stage, is it? Okay. And so we've jumped right into the 3rd stage of marriage. And our lives in this world are fleeting compared with our eternal life in heaven. Marriage is only for this life, so it's good to treasure the years that we do have together. Now, a friend of mine once suggested that an English man and a Japanese woman would have nothing in common. And he said to me, get back to where you once belonged. So I didn't really understand what he was saying or why he was talking to me through the words of a Beatles song, but this was my response to him. But I'm not the only one, as you can see. He was a similar couple. Together in peace. Now you may say I'm a dreamer, but imagine all the people living life in peace.
Imagine the hair.
So let's see what Japan and the United Kingdom do have in common.
Size?
They're both island nations, so they're close to a large continental landmass, but they have a sort of island attitude. Japan is part of Asia, but somehow separate, and the United Kingdom is part of Europe, but somehow separate. Another thing in common is that Britain and Horseshoe are 2 of the 3 most populous islands in the world. So there's a bit of geography for you. What about some history? Now, the United Kingdom has had the largest empire the world has ever known in terms of geographical extent. But, sadly, that empire is no more.
Sadly?
In fact, all empires throughout the whole world have fallen, except one. There is only one empire in the world today, and that is Japan. And its dynasty is now 2,676 years old. Wow. The first Japanese emperor came to the throne in 660 BC. And the current emperor, Akihito, is his direct successor. So we're talking about the time of the Babylonian Empire here. So Japan has seen the rise and the fall of the Greek Empire and the Roman Empire, and it continues on today. Now, shortly after we started going out together, Naoko told me that ever since she was a child, she has been a fan of Beatrix Potter, and especially her Peter Rabbit stories.
Aww.
So here she is with Beatrix herself. So I thought to myself, well, any friend of Peter Rabbit is a friend of mine. So that sort of leads me on to this sort of context and kind of thinking. So let's see how much of Japanese culture has affected my childhood compared with how much of British culture has affected Naoko's childhood. So, let's go.
Oh man.
first of all, we have Peter Rabbit. Here he comes. So Naoko was always a big fan of Peter Rabbit and his stories and all the related stories. So how do I compete with Peter Rabbit? Okay, well, as it happens, as a child, I used to love this television series called Monkey. And its name in Japanese is Son Goku. I was a big fan of Monkey. Let me play you a bit. It's kind of dubbed into English. And I used to even dress like him when I was 12. So here's this monkey, and he has these magical powers, and he can fly around on the cloud. So I'm feeling quite good now. We've got Japanese in my childhood. So, what else does Naoko have up her sleeve? Well, she tells me that she is a big fan of Winnie the Pooh. So here comes Winnie the Pooh and his friends. This is A.A. Milne, another British writer. So how do I compete with Winnie the Pooh? Well, I'm actually getting a bit desperate at this point now because I can't really think of anything. So the best I can come up with is I'm scrabbling around in my parents' attic, and I was able to dig out an old videotape of me singing Japanese in Gilbert and Sullivan's Mikado when I was 22. I know it's not actually Japanese, but it's a British operetta, but it was based in Japan. So that's really the best I can do. So what else does Naoko have? Okay, so we actually have Paddington Bear. She was always a big fan of Paddington when she was younger. Right, so Paddington Bear. Okay, so I'm a bit stuck now because I'm face to face with this bear, and I have no Japanese martial arts that I should have learned as a child, like karate and judo. So here I am, defeated by a bear. I've got nothing else, sorry. But Naoko's got plenty more. She's got Alice in Wonderland, she's a big fan of Lewis Carroll's stories. And furthermore, she's a big fan of James Herriot, who's just very small. So I think with that, we can... that competition. A lot in this world of changing beliefs. But you may be wondering how we first met and when we first started going out together. So I'll tell you, with a little bit of background. This is a car, this is a bear, and this is a tree. Here are three things you might encounter in Vancouver. Now, out of these three, the thing that's most likely to hurt you is the car. And sadly, many people are killed by cars every year, and many thousands are seriously injured. So, in Vancouver, the safest place to be is in the mountains, away from all the traffic. And furthermore, once you're in the mountains, the likelihood of encountering a tree is way higher than that of encountering a bear. Now, as Bill has already mentioned, we had a sad time in 2014. Okay, so here we are on this hike on Canada Day, waving our flags, and we look very happy. And then sadly, what happens later on is that this tree suddenly decides to hit us, and both of us have our crushed feet, our feet crushed. And this was right beside the Seymour River. And both he and I ended up in hospital, but we got off quite lightly compared with the tree, which was dead. Ending up on crutches did slow me down a bit, so doing the grass grind was a bit slower than normal. Naoko was actually having some troubles of her own that year, which I won't go into. That's another story. But somehow, our difficulties seemed to bring us together. And she and I started going out hiking together regularly that same year, 2014. Now, you may recognize this symbol in your invitations, because suffering can actually bring people together. This was true of Jesus on the cross, in his death, bringing God and man in close intimate bond, represented here in the bond of love between Jesus on the cross, and a picture of the church we actually have just got married in, representing the church as a whole. And appropriately, it's this bond between Christ and the church that marriage is based upon. So marriage is actually an image of the bond between Christ and the church. Now, Naoko and I first met in January of 2010 at St. Mary's Church. That was the very place where we first met in 2010, because we were both parishioners there at the time. But we didn't start going out together until Advent in 2014. I knew very early on how much that she loved me. When I went to in January 2015, to remove the plates from my ankle. Naoko was sitting patiently, waiting for me in the waiting room for several hours. And even the staff at the hospital remarked on her dedication and devotion. So I knew that she was the one for me, and I was keen to get married pretty soon. But I thought it would be prudent to wait. And the question was, how long do you wait? Well, like for a lot of things, I turned to the Bible, and I saw 40. The number 40 comes up quite a lot, so I thought I'd wait 40 weeks. So after 40 weeks, I got down on a bended knee, and in my broken Japanese, asked her if she would marry me. And unfortunately for me, I had made myself understood and asked the right question. Equally fortunate for me, she responded back to me in English. The third stroke of fortune was that she said yes. So that's how we are here today. And incidentally, it was actually beside the Seymour River that I proposed to her, just about a kilometre downstream of where we'd had that tree accident a year earlier. One thing that she and I agree upon is that love is triangular. And this is one thing that we've always had in our relationship. A triangle provides a much stronger support compared with a line. In a loving marriage, it's better to have three people: God, you, and your spouse. This is because God is love itself, and He is the author of love. So if you invite Him into your relationship, then you receive His love through your spouse. And you love your spouse with the strength of His love. Now, Father Pierre had mentioned this in his sermon, so I'm really only touching the surface compared with what he has already taught us today. But it's in a very tangible and physical way, and this is the joy of this level of intimacy, in that God is getting to express with joy His deep and eternal love for you through your spouse. And in today's second reading, St. John preaches that love is from God, so therefore we should love one another. Marriage is the normal vocation of everyone, and it is a vocation to love one person, but not exclusively. In loving the one, we learn to love the many. In a good marriage, our hearts become softened and tenderized by constant love and compassion, and this reaches out to all others. In the wedding feast of Cana, we see a symbol of Christ transforming marriage into a sacrament through the changing of water into wine. Through sacraments such as baptism and Holy Communion, we become holier. Whenever you take part in any of the sacraments, you draw closer to God and are strengthened. In marriage, we are immersed in a sacrament on a daily basis. This is how we can view a sacramental marriage. It draws us closer to God and strengthens us as we experience His love for us, shown to us through our spouse. In today's first reading, we heard how Tobias prayed to God that he and his wife might find mercy and grow old together. Now, marriage, just like any close relationship, must be based on mercy, because we're dealing with fallible human beings. If you put two human beings together in close proximity for any length of time, then they're going to hurt each other, often unintentionally. This is why mercy is needed for every marriage. This year, Pope Francis has designated a Jubilee Year of Mercy, and hence this is a good year to get married in. To begin our marriage under the banner of mercy. The Pope says, mercy, the bridge that connects God and man, opening our hearts to the hope of being loved forever, despite our sinfulness. The love between God and us is the reality that we experience in heaven for all eternity. This is our destiny. Marriage is for this life, and gives us the hope of being loved for the rest of our lives here on earth. But it is also a reflection and a glimpse of the love that we will experience for the whole of eternity. This year is a double Jubilee year. As a lay Dominican, the 800th Jubilee of our order is important to me. It was 800 years that St. Dominic founded the Order of Preachers. Through this order, priests, religious and lay people are given all that they need to share the mercy of God with others, and to show them the way to find eternal life with Him in heaven. Enabling someone else to get to heaven to spend eternal bliss in the love of God is obviously the most loving and generous thing that you can do for them. So this brings me back to marriage, because one of the purposes of marriage is to do all you can for the eternal salvation of your spouse, to enable him or her to get to heaven. So my vocation in life is to love Naoko with all my heart, and to do all I can to enable her to reach heaven, where she will experience the peace, the joy, and the love of God. And her vocation is to do the same for me. I would now like to give a little personal testimony. We live in a bit of a strange world today when premarital sex is fairly common. Though just because something is common and popular, it doesn't necessarily make it right. Naoko and I are actually not yet fully married. We've said our vows and we've signed a contract, but the final element that completes marriage is to sleep together. And so one of the purposes of marriage is so that a couple who love each other can give themselves to each other completely. And this is the reason why I've remained a virgin until today, because the church has always taught this. This is not simply a church law, but it is a natural law. It's the way our species procreates and forms the basis for an ordered society where children are brought up and cherished within the family.